Red Dead Redemption, a game that needs no introduction, but I'm gonna talk about it anyway. So, this game took the open world format of what the Grand Theft Auto series was doing and put it in the Old West, and the results? Well, another billion-dollar franchise for Rockstar, an amazing sequel that I haven't played as much, and Rockstar re-released this game this year on modern consoles with no PC port in sight, with no updates to the game, and they're still charging $50 for this? Is Rockstar turning into Nintendo when it comes to price modeling? Still an amazing game though, and if you still have somehow not played it, fucking please do, it's amazing. But that wasn't the start to the series. No, Red Dead Redemption is a loose sequel to a game known as Red Dead Revolver. A lot of people, myself included, played Red Dead Redemption without realizing that it's a sequel. I mean, I know Red Dead Revolver sold decently for its time, but it's been massively overshadowed in comparison to its sequels. So, today I'm taking you guys on my first playthrough of this game to see if it's worth going back to and to look at the forgotten start of the series. Let's get started. To talk about Red Dead Revolver, we first need to talk about Rockstar San Diego. Or should I say, Angel Studios. Yes, like many of Rockstar's subsidiaries, Rockstar San Diego was known as another name before being acquired by Rockstar Games. Before Rockstar ever published any of their games, Angel Studios was known for helping develop games like Echo the Dolphin for the Sega CD. I was not expecting to talk about Echo today, so moving on. Helping make the underappreciated and very goofy Mr. Bones for the Sega Saturn. This game's soundtrack just fucking slaps, by the way. They were responsible for the insane port of Resident Evil 2 for the Nintendo 64. I'm still wondering, how in the hell were they able to make a 2-disc PS1 game fit into a Nintendo 64 cartridge? And they made the game that probably got Rockstar's attention to begin with, Midtown Madness. Now, this game is legendary and has led to a bunch of sequels and is part of the greater Madness series from Microsoft, but I've never personally played this game. The most experience I have with this is watching a video by LGR on it. But I do know that this was a huge success for Angel Studios. So much so, after Midtown Madness 2, Rockstar wanted to publish their next game on the highly anticipated upcoming PlayStation 2. Well, I should say their next two games. Yes, as part of the nearly 30-game launch lineup for the PS2, the first Midnight Club and Smuggler's Run games were released on the same day, becoming big successes for the company, and for me personally, I do remember watching my older sister play a lot of Smuggler's Run back in the day. I really should look at that game sometime. But in between Angel Studios' successes, there was one game that's been in the works for a while. Ever since Angel Studios helped port Resident Evil 2 for the N64, they had a pretty good relationship with Capcom. So much so that they were developing a game that Capcom would publish for them. An action game that would initially be following a SWAT team with 4 players playing simultaneously. But this later developed into more of a Western-themed game by the request of Capcom's own Yoshiki Okamoto. He's known for producing a whole heckin' bunch of Capcom classics, and he was inspired to make a Western game after watching a bunch of spaghetti Western movies, including the movie Blind Man starring Ringo Starr. Yes, this movie is real.
Peace, brothers.
Okay, so aside from film, Okamoto was also inspired by video games, of course. He was taking inspiration from a previous game he worked on called Gunsmoke, a Western shooter that would later inspire games like Sunset Riders. So, by the suggestion of Okamoto, Angel Studios changed their SWAT game into a Western game. So, in a way, Red Dead Revolver would be a spiritual successor to Capcom's Gunsmoke, but unfortunately, this version of the game would never see the light of day. Development of Revolver started in the year 2000 and was announced by Capcom in 2002. Apparently, this version of the game was going to be a lot more arcadey and fast-paced, but that fell through due to what both studios have described as cultural differences. According to Dominic Craig, a former Rockstar employee and one of the lead designers of Red Dead Revolver, the game was turning into what could only be described as Panzer Dragoon. Which, I mean, I love me some Panzer Dragoon, and after seeing what the game's prototype looks like, it does kind of resemble it.
So I understand why Angel Studios wouldn't be happy making a game reminiscent to an old Sega Saturn game,
since that wasn't the most popular thing to do at the time. Plus, Panzer Dragoon Orta just came out, so financially that really wouldn't be a good idea to make a game similar to something that just came out. There was one saving grace to this development through Capcom, though.
They had access to some of Capcom's employees. One of the people they got was Akira Yashida, who's known for doing character designs for shows like Code Geass and Turn a Gundam.
But with video games, he's helped out with character designs for a lot of Capcom classics, including X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Street Fighter 3, and the Power Stone games. If you look at Red Dead Revolver, you could see his influence all over it, with character models that just stick out and look like they're out of someone's graphic novel, with a lot of sharp curves on people's arms, legs, and hair, especially looking at Red, which, I mean, he looks pretty fucking cool. After Take-Two Interactive, Rockstar's parent company, acquired Angel Studios in 2002, since they've made so many bangers for Rockstar so far, Angel Studios became Rockstar San Diego,
and they had a sequel to the Midnight Club series in the works.
While at the same time, they had this Western game that was just kinda sitting there in development hell. So it was Rockstar's Dan Houser who took a look at this Western game and saw potential. Rockstar San Diego got approved to continue making this Western game, the way the developers wanted to make it. So after 2 years with Capcom and 2 more years with Rockstar, Red Dead Revolver was finally put out to the world. Released on May 4th, 2004 for the PS2 and Xbox. Today we're looking at the PS2 version. Well, more accurately, I'll be playing the PS2 version on Aether SX2, a version of PC SX2 for the Mac. I've been playing all of the previous games I've reviewed with an emulator just for better picture quality, but the reason why I mention this is that this game, like a lot of other Rockstar games in the PS2, have this weird ghosting effect that's just not supposed to be there if you're emulating it. I do play these games on real hardware just to be sure that there's no difference between gameplay and performance. You're only going to be seeing those graphical hiccups, like I said.
I just wanted to let you guys know that.
Starting at the game, we get this pretty cool intro that looks very reminiscent of what you would see in a 70s spaghetti western film. Then at the game's main menu, you get 3 options: the story mode, showdown mode, and a journal that's mostly blank right now, but we'll get back to that later. Let's jump into story mode first.
The game opens up with an intro showing the character you play as.
In this case, it's a kid playing finger guns. So in the first level, you're playing as a young boy named Red. One day, your dad, named Nate,
comes back home from somewhere and says that he found gold with his partner.
He gives you his old and not so good pistol because he has this fancy new pistol that only him and his partner have as a symbol of their friendship. So now we get the tutorial to see how to use your newfangled gun, which brings me into the shooting of the game.
This is what you're going to be doing 95% of the time playing the game.
It's pretty limited on your moveset as of now. You can aim, shoot, and strafe around, which feels fine for what it is and is miles better to what the Grand Theft Auto series was doing at the time. I don't know about you, but I always felt that GTA 3 and Vice City had some pretty bad aiming when it came to shooting. It always felt a little floaty, and especially shooting in a car or, God forbid, on a motorcycle in Vice City, it just felt
really crappy.
It did improve a little bit in San Andreas. But with Red Dead here, it feels alright. It's very quick, and has some stuff for it to stand out on its own, which we'll get into later since we only have a pistol right now. After practicing a bit, you get raided. How surprising. And your dad and presumably your mom get killed in the raid, and you kill all the raiders with your newfound gun skills. Oh, and you cleanly shoot off some dude's arm with a single pistol shot. I know this is a video game, but I'm pretty sure that's not how this works. 12 years pass, and you're now a much older guy still looking for the men who killed your family. I should say now that this game is not an open world game like the rest of the series. Rather, this game is more of a level by level shooter, with each level starting off kind of small and slowly growing as we continue with the game. You run into this old guy who wants to sell you some stuff.
Got something that might interest you.
Wait, that's the wrong game. This is the first game's store, and for the most part you buy weapons, upgrades to already owned weapons, journal pages for the main menu's journal, and levels and characters for showdown mode, which I will be talking about way later from now. After checking out whatever the heck this old dude was selling, you run into some trouble with some guys who don't look suspicious at all. This part shows off the game's cover system, which kind of feels like a lot of other games' cover systems at the time. And what I mean by that, it's kind of janky to use. There's a bit of a delay from when you're aiming and then you're about to shoot since you jump out of the corner that you were at. Which, I mean, yes, it's more realistic, but it makes the cover system a little less useful. Also, sometimes when you're going in and out of cover, the camera does this weird jerking motion that doesn't look good. I don't suffer from motion sickness, but I have a good feeling that this wouldn't help someone who does. After shooting a bunch of guys in the distance, you have to take care of more guys, and this introduces Deadeye, which should be familiar if you've played any of the other games in the series, where time slows down and you have this cursor where you can aim exactly where you want to shoot. Admittingly though, in future games, it's used a lot better. In Red Dead Revolver, it's not always precise since you have to move the camera to aim on where you're going to shoot instead of pressing a button on where to aim. Which I know is an upgrade in Redemption 1, but this game doesn't have it at all. Sometimes when you're aiming with it, your cursor may not register, so you don't end up shooting anything at all. And if there are a lot of enemies on screen, you can end up missing your intended target and shoot someone else. Deadeye is fine for when it works, but can be very noticeable when it doesn't. At the end of each level, you get a rating on how well you did and earn some money which could later be used in the game's stores, alongside some other bonuses like characters and levels from showdown mode. Man, they really want you to play showdown mode, but again, more on that later. Back to the story. After taking care of a bunch of idiots who tried to mess with you, the old guy mentions that the guys you just killed could be taken in for a bounty. So you end up doing so, and you take these dead bodies to this dead-end town. And they can't really afford to give you anything. But that's not important right now, since they're getting raided. And Red easily takes care of these bandits. This is also the first part of the game where you duel, or standoff, and I really never understood how to do this properly. I mean, I understand you need to aim your gun, of course, but the timing is the hard part. It's not noticeable now, but
later in the game, it becomes more difficult to handle these enemies since they're faster with their guns.
Also, this cursor just kind of floats around without you controlling it, and you have to use slight movements to get that precise shot. This makes sense and is kind of cool, but in practice, I'm missing a lot of my shots. Needless to say, Red Dead Redemption and its sequel does a much better job when it comes to duels. After taking care of the bandits, the sheriff of the dead-end town is hurt and you have to take him to the nearest doctor, which is all the way in a town called Brimstone, miles away. So the quickest way to get there is by train. This is also the first part of the game where you're not shooting, but talking to people. The dialogue here isn't amazing, but there's this bit where this girl is telling Red that he stinks, and it's pretty funny.
Sir, you are foul-smelling and terribly rude. I have nothing more to say to you.
The facial animations are...
well, it's 2004, what do you expect? Everyone kind of has like 2 or 3 different expressions, and that's about it. I should probably mention the voice acting now. It's fine for what it is, but obviously this wasn't the game's main focus. One thing that stood out for me though is that the voice of Red sounds suspiciously like Steve Blum.
Tell me about the one-armed man.
But I know that's not the case. He's voiced by an actor named Rob Bogue, but he sounds very close to characters like Spike.
Or maybe it's just me. I don't know. After talking to everybody in your cab, you get raided.
And Red has to get the train back in order. This shows off the game's platforming, which, while it isn't horrible, jumping is fine,
but ledge grabbing and pulling yourself up has this delay.
And when you're avoiding stuff that's just kind of flying on top of a train cart, it just makes this sequence a lot more frustrating. Kinda odd that this is the only part of the game that really emphasizes platforming. Almost like they had a lot more in mind for this, but it just got cut in development. Moving on to the next level, you end up in Brimstone, where you see a variety of shops to go into, people to talk to, and most importantly, go to the sheriff's office to do your next bounty. The next few levels are taking care of a bunch of gangs and their leader. The format of these levels, and a lot of future levels, is doing a big shootout with a boss battle at the end of it. The boss of the first gang you have to take care of is this guy named Pig Josh.
The game wants you to sneak up behind him and shoot him, but I wasn't good at this.
Because if you fail to do so, he'll end up chasing you down and throw dynamite at you. This is not as funny as the ragdolling from Redemption, but it's still kinda goofy looking. This is kind of aggravating, but I did make it past him. At the end of his level, you end up saving a guy with a great British accent.
Thank you, sir. Your help has been immensely appreciated.
His name is Jack Swift.
And you end up playing as him in the next level.
Yeah, in this game you could play as many other characters, and some of them have unique abilities. In Jack's case, well, he's called Jack Swift for a reason, replacing Deadeye with a less precise version of it
that quickly locks on to your enemies.
After playing as Jack, Red does a couple more jobs and then takes a visit to the bank to cash in on some of the bounties he's done. You end up overhearing a conversation where this lady is having some trouble with the bank and is about to get their farm taken away.
Her name is Annie Stokes, and she says that the governor is taking away all of her farm hands, while at the same time mentioning a place where there might be some gold.
When Annie leaves the bank in a huff, Red comes in to cash in on the gold that he's earned, and the bank can't exactly give it to him. What kind of place is this? So Red asks the banker about the gold in the mountains, and he can't exactly give that information, so then he asks the banker where Annie lives in a sort of threatening way, but let's not think about that right now, since we actually play as Annie in the next level, as she defends her farm from a bunch of raiders. This is the first level where you have the ability to ride animals,
and the controls are,
well, not the best. To control the animal's movement speed, instead of using one of the face buttons or any of the back buttons, you use the analog stick to move forward and backwards, making there be this slight delay in movement, so I didn't use this often unless the game needed me to. After defending the farm, Red asks Annie,
I wanna know where to go.
She tells Red the best thing that he can do is to go back to the saloon in Brimstone to hear someone talk about it.
After hearing that, Red walks away, giving Annie a pay voucher that's worth $5,000 in gold. Nice guy.
We cut to the saloon in Brimstone, and we hear someone talking about a one-armed man.
Remembering about the one-armed man from his childhood, Red wants to know some more information about that, which leads into a bar fight. Name a Western film that just, doesn't have a bar fight. This level's boss battle is interesting. He has to run into things to stun him. If you don't do that, and you're shooting him normally, or with Deadeye, and there are guaranteed shots with that, it doesn't count, so you're just wasting ammo. After that mess, Red gets locked up in the sheriff's office for his trouble. The sheriff then figures out who Red is and tells him about the one-armed man, alongside the man he follows, General Diego. Time for a flashback. 12 years ago, we see a general trying to protect his borders from the US cavalry. They end up blowing up a bunch of their cannons and eventually destroying a bridge so the army can't make it across. This level is fine until the very end where you have to defend your men putting bombs all across the bridge, and they can wander straight into enemies, and if they die, you have to redo the entire level over again. Diego's men run into one very unlucky dude who is about to get killed, but then he talks about a gold mine just to protect himself. He also says that his partner Nate owns half of the claim, but he's willing to give Nate's part to Diego to spare his life. Kinda unique that the game lets you play as the bad guy without even knowing it until the end of the level. Of course, this leads to what happens in the beginning of the game. After the flashback, the sheriff lets Red go and now he's after Diego and his men. You have to hijack this horse and shoot down this buggy that presumably has Diego on it. This took me a few times, but after adjusting to the weird horse controls, I blew up the thing. But this leads to Red getting kidnapped. Luck is on his side though when his cousins, a Native American guy named Shadow Wolf, happens to see Red and goes out and helps him. Oh yeah, Red's also half Native American on his mom's side. Neat! Next level you play as Shadow Wolf as he goes through the mountains taking out Diego's men. You don't have any guns, but his bow and arrow and a couple of well-timed headshots does the job pretty well. After going through the mountains and dealing with this guy who roars, we go into this mineshaft where Red's being held captive. I'm surprised the general and his men didn't just kill him, but let's just continue. Red escapes his cell with his cousin in this mineshaft with this American soldier that goes by the name of Buffalo. Buffalo goes to find help, while Red mows down the guys in the mineshaft. This level also had one of my first unsuccessful duels in the game. How in the hell am I not supposed to get hit here? Is it 3 perfect headshots with these guys? What the fuck? Next up, you play a level as the Buffalo Soldier, as he rides a cart full of dynamite to head to the governor as soon as possible to tell him about the Mexican army causing trouble in the mountains. This is probably one of the worst levels of the game though.
Not for the character you play as,
but for the fact that the cart that you're on can just easily explode and it's so fucking slow. After dealing with more soldiers and a tribe of Native Americans, Buffalo makes it to the governor, telling him about the crazy shit that's happening in the mountains. And of course he's corrupt, where these suspicious looking guys take Buffalo away, presumably killing him. After that, we go back to Red as we go through a fort full of the general's men. Unfortunately, Shadow Wolf doesn't make it, but you do end up killing the one-armed dude who has this cannon arm? What the fuck, is this Wild Wild West? This level also has a turret section, and, well, it kinda sucks. You can't aim below you, which, I mean, that makes sense, it's a turret, but they happen to place a bunch of enemies where you can't aim, so they end up shooting you. Plus, you're just, like, standing out in the open where everyone can shoot you as well, so I just ended up using my normal weapons. After that, we cut to Red chasing a train with the general on it.
And even though the horse controls are weird, this is still pretty cool for the time.
After we stop the train, we get our revenge on the general. And now we're back in Brimstone, with all of Red's troubles, for the most part, gone for now. Yeah, he's still kinda broke, but he can make that money back with the battle royale that's going off in the town. Oh yeah, they've been mentioning this off and on throughout the story. It's the reason why Jack Swift came to Brimstone, and Annie wants to go into the competition as well to get some money to fix up her ranch. We're also introduced to a man by the name of Mr. Kelly. He's the guy who previously won last year's competition, and he totally doesn't look suspicious at all. Why am I not surprised that a man named Mr. Kelly is evil? After going through the first rounds of duels without a hitch and outright killing these guys, oh shit, they take these competitions pretty seriously, we make it to the final round where we end up facing against the suspicious Mr. Kelly. And I don't know if I have shit luck, bad timing, or a combination of the two, but I sucked at this part of the game, repeating the same fight over and over until I finally shot this fool in the head multiple times. After beating Mr. Kelly, the governor, who's been hosting the entire competition to begin with, makes things work in his favor with his boys and him pulling out their guns, wanting to kill Red. After seeing the governor's gun, that's when Red realizes that he was your dad's partner who fucked him over all of those years ago. But the governor doesn't want to get his hands dirty right now, interesting. So Mr. Kelly gets back up from the ground, almost like I didn't shoot him in the head multiple times, and we face off in the town. Admittingly, this is kinda cool since you're not allowed to pull out your gun in Brimstone. But even though I'm playing this on an emulator, the frame rate takes a dip because all the townspeople just like
Run around and panic.
Luckily, this fight isn't too hard, but I did run into something that I'm pretty sure I wasn't supposed to see. Kinda weird to see a CPU just like hang out at the side of a building while being shot at, but this was the only time I saw this in the game, so I'll excuse it. But after that, it's time to get our revenge on the governor, with Jack and Annie coming along the way to help Red out. After a multiple level raid into the governor's house, we end up helping Buffalo out of his prison cell. Shit, they kept him alive? And then we run into the governor for a final duel. This is actually easier than the previous duel with Mr. Kelly. I only died here twice. In the end, Red gets his revenge and rides off into the sunset,
letting the townspeople have the governor's gold.
Roll credits.
This game's plot can be easily summed up as a revenge story between Red and the governor. And the governor is just like some corrupt guy with a bunch of gold, so that's about as stereotypical of a villain as you can get. A lot of this game's plot can be boiled down to some things that you would see in many typical Western films that Red Dead takes inspiration from.
Revenge, corruption, and a lot of gunfights. This plot is nowhere near as deep as future games in the series, and part of me wants to see John, Arthur, or even Dutch, but we don't get anything resembling that. Rockstar has said that this game's plot is completely non-canon from the rest of the Red Dead series, and after analyzing it, it kinda makes sense as to why. For a series such as Red Dead, to have so many different layers of depth in their plots, Red Dead Revolver stands out for just how simple it is. But if we look at the story on its own, without any other context for the future games,
it's okay.
It's an average Western tale that gets kind of predictable at points, but it does its job guiding the player through the game, taking you to a variety of locations. The journal in the game's main menu also expands on the story. This is basically the game's lore, and they really put a lot of effort into this book, with hundreds of pages on each character in the game, every location, and all the weapons you use. This is pretty cool, but I wish that some of this was actually bled into the game's plot, so it can have a little bit more depth. But that's not what Red Dead Revolver is trying to do. It's trying to imitate a lot of classic Western films, and by doing so, it takes what's best known from those films, and tries to recreate them in the most general of terms, while at the same time having a lot of set pieces and shootouts. As for the gameplay, it plays relatively well. Having a variety of weapons is cool, but I mainly stuck to a decent pistol, or sometimes I would dual-wield pistols, while at the same time also having a rifle. You can use a shotgun in the game, but you're more likely to be using a rifle since there are more open areas in each level that you need a ranged weapon to use. You also have some throwable items, but I mainly kept a dynamite as my go-to, and it works alright. Its blast radius is kinda small, so it did make it kinda situational, but it was useful when I needed it. The cover system would need some work, of course, at least going in and out of corners, being just a little bit less janky for my taste. And Deadeye, admittingly, is a really cool feature, and would be expanded and improved on in future games of the series. So, I've been mentioning Showdown mode throughout this video, but what exactly is this? Well, Showdown mode is this game's multiplayer. I was not expecting this to be here, but here we are. You could play as Red, or you can use a wide variety of characters, and, well, it's more quantity over quality here. You have all of the characters you've played as during the story mode, of course, all of the bosses that you've beaten, and a bunch of side characters, including Red's mom?
What are you doing to my pots and pans?
The mode itself is killing as many people in a small amount of time while collecting these cards that give you special abilities. This mode is fine, I guess, and if I had to theorize, since this mode has a 4-player simultaneous mode, this would have been the blueprint for what was going to be that SWAT game that Red Dead was originally going to be. But that's just speculation, of course. Graphically, this game looks alright for the 6th generation of consoles. You're not getting amazing graphics here, but more stylized graphics. As for the music, fuck, this soundtrack is great. Unfortunately, it's not that big of a soundtrack, but for the tracks that we do have, they're really good, especially the main theme of the game. This game, for all of its faults, has left a legacy that's paved the way for greatness. Whether that be for games such as Neversoft's Gun or the Call of Juarez series, and of course this game led Rockstar to make the rest of the Red Dead series, seeing an open world Western game make a lot more sense the more time they kept making Red Dead Revolver. Westerns, unlike a lot of other gaming tropes such as military shooters or zombies, hasn't been as oversaturated as them, so it's kinda special whenever a Western game comes out. And it's thanks to Red Dead Revolver for this to happen. This game may be somewhat forgotten, but it's definitely worth your time. It's not that long, it only took me about maybe 4 or 5 hours to beat it on normal mode, so I would recommend taking a look at Red Dead Revolver.
This game may be a little rough around the edges, and the plot can be predictable at points, but I had fun in the end, and that's what matters to me. So now that I've played Red Dead Revolver, let me know what you guys think about the game, if you have any good memories about it, or if you were aggravated by a few things like I mentioned. Thank you all very, very, very much for the amount of support I've gotten in the past few weeks for this channel. I am just like amazed for the fact that I've gotten like 500 subscribers on this channel this fast. One person I want to give a huge thank you to is Mistress Dove for the amount of love that she's given to this channel. Letting our audience know about my stuff and helping out with the script for this video. If you like my content, please check her stuff out. I would highly recommend starting with the Kingdom Hearts video. Her links will be in the description below. Thank you all for watching, stay safe, and have a wonderful day.